Informative classics. What is going on, guys? Guys, let me start off by thanking you for your viewership. Your continued support is greatly appreciated here on the channel. Guys, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and tell you about today's interview. Guys, September 1963, on the 15th of the month, some idiots decided that they would make a point by bombing a church to stop the movement that we know as the civil rights movement from doing anything further to get themselves free from the grip of the Jim Crow era. On September 15th, 4 little girls prepped themselves in a bathroom in the basement, and another little girl upstairs received a phone call that there was 3 minutes left on the bomb. However, little did she know, she only had a minute. That little girl, now a grown woman, Miss McKinstry, today will share her story with us all on this channel on the 60th anniversary on the death of her friends. Join me now and subscribe if you're new to hear this tragic story. Informative classics. With your high school, Parker High School, as we know, is named after the first principal of the high school, which was formerly known as Independence High School. Industrial High School, excuse me. He was also a school teacher in the 16th Street Baptist Church. I know we went over that, and also the first graduation that took place for that high school had also taken place inside the 16th Street Baptist Church as well.
Okay.
All right. So your high school at the time, around that time, was your high school segregated?
No schools were segregated when I was a kid. None of the schools in Birmingham. Segregation, in fact, the latest copy of the segregation laws that I have in Birmingham were dated from 1954.
Mm-hmm.
But there were no schools that were segregated. There were a few private schools who might have allowed the presence of, let's say, doctors' children or attorneys' children, but public schools, which is what Parker High School was,
okay,
was not integrated during the time that I was there, and as were none of the other public schools, white or black.
Well, I know, as we mentioned before, that y'all also were released at different times as well. So even though the school had like predominantly black students in it, you guys were not even released at the same time. I think you said that the white kids were released about 2:30, and you guys were released about like 3 o'clock.
We were released at 3:15 every day.
Okay.
Yeah, for the 4 years that I attended school, we were due at school at 8:15, and we were released at 3:15. The white students were due at school at 7:30, and they were released from school at 2:30.
Okay. So that way it was a really large gap. You guys never even seen each other.
No, that was the intent, that we would not even actually pass, whether that was in walking or on the bus or wherever any of us happened to be. It gave everybody an opportunity to get home or be wherever you were supposed to be when school was over without encountering anyone else.
Oh, okay. So on May 2nd and 3rd, the SCLC held 2 demonstrations. What were these demonstrations supposed to accomplish? That's D-Day and Double D-Day.
Yeah, well, ultimately, if we talk about the fact that Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth had been marching since the Brown v. Board decision, which would have been 1954, ultimately, what we were marching about was trying to integrate schools that, according to federal law, according to the Brown versus Board of Education decision, should have already been integrated some 8 or 9 years earlier. But in 1963, everything was still very, very segregated. So the march was about, number one, ending segregation. That was one. And Reverend Shuttlesworth would say, we aim to kill segregation or to be killed by it. But that was the number one goal, ending segregation. And following that number one goal were things like allowing the public transit system to hire Black people, allowing them to work in the department stores, grocery stores where they shopped. And of course, the integration of the schools as well, given that Brown v. Board had been proclaimed by the federal government so many years earlier, and nothing, and Birmingham, for all practical purposes, had not changed at all. So ending segregation, getting some of the very public jobs and so forth, integrating the schools were several of the goals that they had.
And I guess when these goals were not reached, and there still was a really good turnout, because the tragic events that took place on that day reached all the way to the White House, and President Kennedy at the time was not happy about what he's seen happening to you guys out there on the streets. Bull Connor riding around with the white tank and police dogs biting children, fighting other people, the water hoses, which were not expected. It just was a really bad day. So with all of these different events taking place, I'm guessing that the segregation still didn't come about that was needed, or that was supposed to be accomplished, because on August 28th, Martin Luther King did the March on Washington, which is we know as one of the biggest demonstrations of peace in American history. Now, this was initially supposed to say, hey, we're tired, we're done. This demonstration is to say segregation has to come now. Desegregation, has to come now. And we want it to come by means of this march.
Well, the March on Washington did include ending segregation. It was also, and primarily, a poor people's march.
Okay.
It was, I think, the very first poor people's campaign that we had seen in our country. But along with the idea of ending poor people or launching a poor people campaign was also the notion still of ending segregation. And you're right, the president was very disturbed at what he had seen in Birmingham. The rest of the nation was appalled at what they had seen as well in the world. had seen. Actually, the dogs, the water hoses, and so forth. So the President Kennedy appealed to the nation. But when we went to Washington and people saw the crowd that was there in Washington, the crowd that represented the things that they were trying to end, I think that there was somewhat of a fearful moment for our nation, for people. If you were not a person of color during that March on Washington, there may have been some fear that, hey, they're really going to succeed, or we're getting ready to integrate or to do some things we had never intended to do in our country. So, yeah, I think the Poor People's Campaign, the march, sort of highlighted or exacerbated the notion that Black people were intending to stand strong and not to waver in their fight for equality, meaning ending segregation in the schools and economic justice too, ending a lot of the poverty that existed in the country.
And then with this peaceful march, and with such a strong stance that it stood on, it did cause the desegregation of the schools, correct?
Well, many of us believe that March on Washington was the impetus for the bombing of the 16th Street Church.
Right.
If you could see go back and see the pictures of the people that congregated in Washington, I think that was a bit threatening to many of the people that saw it.
Right.
And likely said, if we're not careful, they're going to be successful in ending segregation and demanding equality. And so many people feel that, somewhere in Alabama the order was given, or somewhere, whether they were in Alabama or not, but somewhere the order was given to bomb the church. We know that the Ku Klux Klan and its members were ultimately held responsible for that.
Right.
We didn't know initially, but the thought has always been that the church was bombed as a way to frighten those that were interested in obtaining their freedom. The church was bombed as a way to end the protests and the marching that was going on. It was meant to intimidate, to make people retreat, go back home, and just forget the ideas that they had about equality and ending segregation.
So 18 days later, we're now at September 15th. And then this is the morning of September 15th, which is a Sunday. What was a typical Sunday like in your home? A typical Sunday morning?
Well, normally on Sunday morning, we were all getting ready for Sunday school. I had a couple of important duties, which included running the library after church. It included being the secretary of the Sunday school. So we were always there promptly at 9:30. And that particular Sunday was not different. I was driven to church by my father with two younger brothers. We were dropped off at 9:30, and my father went on to work. And it was just a typical Sunday, aside from the fact that it was Youth Day. And our theme for that day, the title of the lesson for Sunday school and the title of the sermon that we did not get to hear was A Love That Forgives, from the text of Luke. So we were excited because everyone had a role to play. If you were a young person, you had a role to play, either reading the scripture in the choir as an usher or something. And we were all excited about the fact that it was our day. It was Youth Day.
And next, we have the excitement. You're doing your regular duties that you do every Sunday. So just this particular Sunday, things were a little bit off. Can you break down the event?
Well, when I arrived at church, I placed those two younger brothers in their Sunday school classes. And then I immediately proceeded upstairs because it was my job to pass out the Sunday school envelopes in which people gave their offering. And we had about 10 classes at that time. The adults were upstairs. The children's or younger youth classes were downstairs. So my job was just to get those materials in their hands so they could record the number of people present. They could record their offering. And then my job later, about 10:20, was to go back and pick up all of those reports and create a cumulative report, which I would read when we reassembled after Sunday school. So this Sunday was not different, I think, until it was time for me to leave my class about 10:15. And I collected all of the reports downstairs. And as I proceeded upstairs, I passed the bathroom where the girls were. I saw them there. They appeared to be just combing hair and talking, just primping as girls do. I did not pause to talk to them. I said good morning and kept walking.
Yeah.
Even though it was youth day, and even though I was, Cynthia and I had a club meeting scheduled later that day at 3 p.m., I didn't pause to discuss any of that. I just passed on by, said good morning, kept running on up the stairs. And when I reached the top of the stairs, the phone was ringing in the church office. And when I went in, I peeped in, and Mrs. Shorter was not there, so I answered the phone, and the caller on the other end said 3 minutes.
Yeah. Now,
as they said that, they hung up.
Well, as we mentioned before, Miss Shorter had been receiving these calls all morning.
Right. She did mention that to me when I first arrived at Sunday school, and I went upstairs to get the reports to pass them out. She did mention that to me, and I really, she didn't say we've been receiving bomb threats or that I'm afraid somebody. The way she said it just didn't register with me. She let me know we've been getting a lot of phone calls, and she was very uncomfortable about the phone calls. I wasn't so sure what it was. And of course I know now perhaps what made her so uncomfortable when she mentioned it. The other thing is that the church had been receiving a lot of threatening phone calls, but we were not told, young people were not told. What we learned later was that they assembled the deacons, the trustees, the adults of the church, and they had a conversation, and they said, look, we've been getting these phone calls. They're very threatening phone calls, so we're going to place our deacons and trustees around the church anytime we're here. That's on Sunday morning. That's on Wednesday Bible study nights. And if we have to meet here for any reason, we think it's a good idea to have people stationed, our members stationed outside to watch the church. I think, though, that what the pastor himself has said is that after the March on Washington, after the favorable speech by John F. Kennedy, and after the city of Birmingham sort of agreed and said, yeah, well, we need to take another look at this. I think we should try to work with what we have been asked to do. It was at that point that apparently some people felt threatened. It was at that point that the Klan went into action. And so the point that I'm really making is that the adults in the church were well aware of these bomb threats.
Okay.
Many of them had gotten them at their homes. I mean, they were well aware, but I was not aware because I was 14 years old.
Cool.
And They never called the children in and said, look, here's what's happening. What they tried to do was keep everything from us, and they did. So I really didn't know what Miss Shorter was talking about. It wasn't that I heard a bomb every time it went off in Birmingham. It didn't matter where you lived. You always heard the bomb when it went off. And all of Birmingham heard it. What you also knew after you heard that bomb was that somebody was going to call your house and say they just bombed the AG Gaston Motel or whatever had been bombed. You would learn about it. And you were always grateful to know that no one had been hurt or had been injured. So I did know about bombings in general, what was happening in Birmingham, but no one had ever told any of us, hey, the church is getting threatening phone calls every day. Miss Shorter knew it, which explains her reaction. But that's not what she conveyed to me. You know, she's been getting crazy phone calls. Nothing that would have indicated to me what was about to happen.
So this morning you went to the office and you pick up the phone, and we go from there now.
So when I answered the phone, the caller on the other end said 3 minutes. That's all he said. And he hung up the phone, and I'm still holding in my left arm all of my materials that I have collected from downstairs. So I answered the phone with my right hand. I hang up the phone with my right hand, and I walk out of the office and go down those 2 steps out into the sanctuary. And just as I reached the very first row of the pews, the bomb exploded.
Wow. So now bomb explodes. You hit the floor, and I remember you saying that at first you thought it was thunder, like you didn't know if it was thunder or if it was a bomb.
I really didn't know what it was, because the bombs that I had always heard, generally I was either inside of my house. On many occasions, I was just sitting outside. We would be sitting outside talking or playing, and we would hear it. But I think it just sounds very different if you're on the inside of a building that is being bombed as opposed to the outside.
Oh,
that's
okay.
what I.
So once it goes off, I know you say you're on the floor, and then that's when you hear the footsteps coming towards your way, and everyone is now making their way out of the church. But instead, you have to find out where your little brothers are at, and
right.
And your search for your little brothers, you stumble back up upon the lounge, because it was, like you said, it was a lounge, like a restroom / lounge where the girls were at, and it was in totally dismantled at the time that you arrived back than what it was when you first went down there. And I know you mentioned that there was nothing you can see. You know, like the pictures, as we mentioned before, the pictures online, we can see inside, but from the other side, as you mentioned, you couldn't see that. That's not what you could see. You couldn't see daylight from the other side.
No, that's right. Those pictures were taken from the outside of the church. And what I did was just look in every empty room. We had little classrooms on the left and the right side of the church. We also had a men's bathroom down there and a women's bathroom. Today, both of those bathrooms have been moved to a different floor. And but when I started to the girls' bathroom, I thought to myself, they wouldn't be in the girls' bathroom anyway, because they knew, girls from boys' bathroom. Mm-hmm. So I started in there twice. Went outside, and I did. When I first came in, I didn't see them anywhere, and I went outside and looked around. Then I came back inside, and I started toward that bathroom again, and I just said, well, they wouldn't be in here. But I just was looking in every empty space downstairs. That's basically what I was trying to do, just see if maybe they were hiding or something in one of these spaces. And I was not able to see them. And in fact, we didn't even know at that point that the 4 girls had been killed, had not made it out of the bathroom. I would not even know that until I found my father. We all went home, and someone would call later about maybe 2:30ish or somewhere thereabout to let us know that the girls had not made it out of the bathroom.
Because at this moment, what has to be understood is your main concern is your brothers. And no, go ahead.
That's right.
And as you finally make it outside, you stumble upon your dad. And I know you mentioned that, and when I in the book, go ahead.
My father was on his way to work.
Right.
Our family had one car. He said when he arrived at work, some of his coworkers said to him, "Hey, they just bombed your church." And he knew that my mother couldn't do anything because he had the car, so he got up and came back down to the church. He got back in the car and came back to the church and was looking everywhere for us. I was the first person. Well, actually, he encountered my 10-year-old brother. He encountered him before he got to the church. My brother was running to the downtown area, and my father saw him, and he stopped and, got him, and he sort of just encountered him first. So he got him, he put him in the car, and he came on down toward the church, and he saw me just walking around in the crowd because I was still looking for the 2 young brothers. And he was able to get me out of the crowd into the car. We couldn't find the younger brother, but when we got home, my father took the 2 of us home. When we got home, my mother had received a call from a gentleman that was had encountered my 6-year-old brother and told my mom that he would wait right where he was and would keep him there until my father could get back with the car to pick him up.
Right. Because I know you said when it happened, he ran out of the church, and on his pursuit away from the church, he ran into a gentleman, held tightly onto his legs, and that gentleman took him on to his house, and that's the phone call y'all received was from that gentleman who safely took your little brother to his place. I guess he was afraid, and your little brother let him know his address and everything, and he was safe after that.
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That story was given to us by the man himself.
Right.
And we were, of course, my mom was very grateful, and he assured her that he would hold him there, right there with him, until someone could pick him up.
Okay. So now you guys, like you say, you guys are home, and the events of the day is still not like really settled in or really hit you guys. And then that's when you received the phone call that the 4 girls were actually killed in the bombing. And then
Right.
I know you mentioned that it was at that moment you realized that your friend and one of your best friends was you're never going to be able to see her again.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, usually when an event like this takes place, our parents, even before we go to sleep or even before you end out that day, they would usually try to have a conversation with us to make sure that we are, set at ease. Did a conversation take place that night, as you remember, about what happened?
No, there was no conversation. After my mother received the phone call that the girls had not made it out of the bathroom, she let me know. She informed me, and she may have spoken to someone else later that evening, but I did not speak to anyone else, nor did she relay to me that she had spoken to anyone or what they said. I kind of think that what they might have been doing was just watching us, just to see if we reacted in any ways that would have been of concern. If we appeared to be really frightened or afraid or whatever, but there was no conversation at all. And in fact, we went to sleep, and Monday morning, we were back to school at 8 o'clock as always.
Okay, so Monday morning, you're back in school. I mean, I'm sure you don't remember the morning that you woke up. You could have probably had breakfast typically like you usually do, or however you're prepared or you prep for Monday morning. But now you're back in school and you go to school. What is the reaction from the people, the students at school, the faculty, the staff? How is everybody reacting to this event, this tragic event that just took place yesterday?
There was no reaction. There was no reaction. It was not discussed. There was no, well, how do you feel today? Do you want to talk about what happened? Were any of you there? There simply was nothing said about what the events of the previous day.
So and like we mentioned, there were no count. Now, did the school have counselors back then? The school did have counselors?
We had what we called guidance counselors.
Okay.
And I think their primary job was to, number one, if you had a behavior problem, and if you didn't go to them for that, it might be to talk about college applications or opportunities, possibly even jobs or something. But no one, they weren't there. We didn't have nurses, as you know them.
Right.
And later, when my children went to school, the schools had nurses, but we didn't have nurses either. Oh no, there just was no discussion. There was no moment of silent prayer. There was no assembly in the auditorium. There was nothing. It was just as though nothing was different. Nothing had happened. Whatever you were thinking, only you knew that you were thinking.
Right. So, if you was able to go back and you was able to just have a moment to tell a teacher about how your friends were, what little bit can you tell us about Denise McNair, about Cynthia Wesley, about Carol Robinson, about Addie Collins? What can you tell us about them that we've all heard or we haven't heard, or anything that, like, if we were to take it back and you were able to have that conversation, what would you be able to say that people need to know about them so that they are remembered and this is not forgotten about?
Well, okay, now what everyone always has to remember is that I knew them when the church was bombed. 3 of them were 14 years old. 1 was 11 years old. But I was also 14 years old.
Right.
So, the idea that any of us as children are wondering about what somebody will be when they grow up, or wondering about someone's future, it just wasn't in our mind.
No.
But what I do remember, Cynthia Wesley's father was my grade school principal, and her mother also taught school and was an excellent seamstress. I would have imagined that she would have been a great teacher or educator. Same thing with Carol Robinson. Her mother was the local librarian, one of them anyway.
Alpha.
And Alpha Robinson.
Yeah.
And she had, Carol had an older sister and brother. So I kind of would have seen both of those young women in the educational profession, I think. Addie Mae Collins, I did not know as well. Addie's sister was in my Sunday school class, Junie. Her name was Junie.
Okay.
And I really don't know much about what Addie's aspirations would have been. She was a very quiet young lady. Of all of the sisters, there were 4 sisters at the church. and Addie was the most quiet of those four sisters.
Okay.
So I knew her well, but I knew her sister better.
She looked.
And in fact, her sister and I, sometimes after Sunday school, while we were waiting for church to start, sometimes her sister and I would walk over to the store or somewhere, together. And then finally, the youngest victim, Denise McNair, was 11 years old. Denise was just real friendly, cute little girl. Her father was my 9th grade teacher. He also was our local photographer, took a lot of my pictures, personal pictures. When I needed them, I would go to him. They said they thought Denise, her parents have indicated that they thought at one point she wanted to be a teacher. And some have said they thought she said she wanted to be a doctor. But, again, she was 11 years old, and I never had that conversation with her. I have no doubt that all of these young women would have made tremendous contributions to the world that we live in. They were all just very vibrant and alive and excited, and I just have no doubt that they would have made some awesome contributions to us.
I believe that their stories in which we're sharing today, and your story in which we share now, is putting them in a place of education. Is putting them in a place of an educator or a professor, and even more, a historian, and many different things, because they become great through their memories. As we know, right. Their memories as they live on, and as we learn about them each September 15th, the day set aside for them for people to learn and to understand about the event. They will forever be teaching children, until the end of time. So I believe that all of them are, as we want to probably say today, that they all are teachers. They're all teaching us, as we learn today and as we grow and understand, and we come closer to the events, all of the events that even surround the bombing. We all learn about those as well. So they're teaching us history, and they're teaching us about themselves.
Well, we can certainly say that this Birmingham was a city of bombing, so it had earned the name of Bombing Ham.
Okay.
But this particular bombing, September 15th, 1963, would be referred to forever as the bomb that was heard around the world.
Yes.
And in fact, it was, God has blessed me to travel to places like Rome and Spain and India, and on one occasion I visited Dublin, Ireland, visited a Benedictine monastery. I actually stayed there a little while. And even those monks, I mentioned that trip only to say, even those monks, as isolated as monks tend to be, living unto themselves, they were well aware of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. Yes. And once they became aware that here was this little black girl from Birmingham, all the way over there in Dublin, Ireland, I just feel that they must have offered a lot of prayers for me, because when I left there, I felt strengthened in a way that I had not ever felt before. And several of we did a little programming and things while I was there, and I've seen a lot of creativity used in programs where I have been the person speaking. But the one thing that they put on that program was, they didn't put my name, they put witness.
Oh, okay.
That was all they put, witness. The witness. And that is to say, this is the witness. She bears witness to the horror of hatred, to the horror of what happens when we don't love our brothers and sisters as ourselves.
Yes. Let us not move too forward without mentioning that there was actually a fifth girl in the bathroom as well, and that was Addie Mae's sister, Sarah. Sarah was correct. Also in the bathroom as well that day.
That's correct. And we have a snapshot of the last few minutes in that bathroom because of Sarah. Her name is Sarah Collins.
Yeah.
And Sarah told us that the last thing she heard, she was in a very different part of the bathroom. There was one part, the front part was a lounge where you could talk and sit, and etc. Then you went through another door, and there were bathrooms and places to wash your hands. And Sarah was in the back part, but she said the last thing that she heard was the 9-year-old Denise asking her sister, Addie, please tie the sash on my dress. And right at that moment, the bomb exploded.
Wow. And I know Carol Robinson was supposed to perform that night at school on Monday, and the band. How did the band go on with that before? With that ceremony? I wonder, did it take place, or because she's no longer there? Are they not having it now? Do you remember how that turned out?
I don't know, because I think we were in different high schools. If I remember correctly, she was Bowman High School. I was at Parker High School.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So, in the years after the bombing, now, how were you able to cope with society? Once you graduate from high school, you're now in Tennessee. How are you able to cope going forward?
Well, that's a good question. For a long time, I just got up every morning and put one foot in front of the other, and kind of did whatever was on my schedule to do that day. I graduated from Parker High School. I was in, number 7 in a class of over 400 students. And I left after I graduated. I went to Fisk University, and I was very perfunctory in everything that I was doing. I didn't have my heart in it. I didn't have my soul in it. I was just sort of putting one foot in front of the other at that point, until I could get to a point. I was still trying to understand it. So until I could get to a point where I could put it all in perspective and understand what happened, I was just kind of zombie-like, perfunctory, performing over almost the next 20 years.
We can imagine, and as we spoke about before, once that bombing took place and you found out that you lost some people who were very close to you, and some people, showed you things at a young age that no young child should have been shown. We talk about this dark cloud, and as this dark cloud comes around you, this dark cloud chases you, as you just mentioned, for 20 years, and it's like you can't see the light outside of this cloud. This cloud is always there, forming, gaining new powers, or how we want to say, new transformation through the reoccurrence of the things that are bothering you. And in this search for some type of light out of this darkness, and out of the things that were haunting you, did this peace that you finally found, did this peace come with the convictions of Chamberlain in 77, Cash's passing, and the convictions of the remaining 2 men by 2004? And I know you were at the trial of Cash in 2002.
Yeah. I think what was plaguing me all those years was fear, number one, because I had seen the bombing of the church allowed me to know and to see what human beings are capable of in the name of what they believe. In the name of believing segregation, they were willing to bomb a church and willing to have people die, and willing not to do anything about it, because after it was 14 years after the bombing before the first person was even arrested. So I think what was happening, I had to understand, as a 14-year-old, I I had not come to understand the hatred that exists in this country. My grandparents, my parents, none of them ever taught hatred about anyone. So, and my grandfather was a student of the Bible. He was pastoring 2 churches and teaching school. And I learned so much from my grandparents, and I knew that this wasn't consistent with the teachings of the Bible. And so the confusion was, how can neighbors or how can people treat their neighbors and other people this way? As a child, I didn't understand that. What I know today is that people believe what they believe. I believe in Almighty God. I believe He has the power to change us. If we're hating, I believe He has the power to change that hate to love. If you allow that, if you want that. It is a choice, Shahir, that we make every day. It is a choice how we choose to treat the people that we encounter. I can choose to hate you. I can choose to ignore you. And for the racism that exists in our country still, I can choose to say, well, here comes another black person, a brown person, and I don't have anything to do with them because they are black or brown. So it's a choice that we make. That's what I had to learn. God wasn't being mean to me. He wasn't teaching me a lesson. Evil things happen. And in fact, one of the white citizens of this city wrote an article that said good things happen bad things happen when good people say nothing, when good people do nothing. So at any point in life, at any point in history, when we have people that are mistreating other people, people that are doing things that are wrong, like bombing the church. And remember, there were over 60 unsolved bombings before they bombed the church. No one had ever been arrested or taken to justice for those 60 unsolved bombings. So as long as no one is willing to confront evil, as long as no one is willing to say anything, we will continue to get what we've got. Right. And because parents did not want to teach hatred, because my grandparents did not teach hatred, it didn't occur to me that what we have is just simply a matter of hatred. We have people that hate other people because of what color they are. That's still very difficult for me to understand, because what color anyone is has nothing to do with who they are, has nothing to do with anything else. But it took me a long time to learn that lesson. And I struggled and suffered through it because I just thought my life was doomed, I was doomed to die. Because people had killed my friends, nothing was done about it. Then something was kind of sort of done about it when one person was arrested. You know, and it's a strange, you can think about. Do you have children, Shahir?
Yes, I have children, yes.
Can you imagine someone bombing your house and 2 of your children died and no one ever says anything more about it? 2 years pass, 5 years pass, 10 years pass, and no one comes to you and say, we are so sorry for what happened. No, we don't condone that type of treatment. We're still working on it. We're going to make sure we get the person. You just don't hear anything.
Right. And
your children are just gone.
And
this was the environment that we were living in at that time.
And when we have the gentleman, once, facing some type of justice, coming out to say, hey, this bomb was not supposed to go off when it went off. It was a house-made bomb, so we didn't know. It was only supposed to disrupt service for that day. It wasn't supposed to interrupt service. It was supposed to disrupt, cause it from not happening at all. But when we think about the calls that were coming in the morning, and we think about the call that you received, as we mentioned before, these men had to be watching from somewhere to see when this bomb would go off. So you knew at 2 o'clock in the morning the bomb didn't go off. You knew at 8 o'clock the bomb didn't go off. So if you truly didn't mean to cause any harm, that means by 3 o'clock in the morning you should have got that bomb out of there, because it didn't go off when you thought it was going to go off. But clearly you guys called back seconds before the bomb went off, and the bomb went off and people were killed. So anything that you're saying now is basically water under the bridge, because people were killed regardless of what you tried to demonstrate, or regardless of what you tried to accomplish that day. And mentioning, me being a dad, me having children, I have a 12-year-old daughter that is around the same age that you guys were during this time. And last year when I researched this story, this year doing research, reading your book, and that anger that I'm sure that Chris felt, and I'm sure that the other dads and moms felt for their daughters, your dad, your mom, I'm sure they still felt anger, even though they had their daughter there with them. Just the attempt that you could have been gone. I would have been highly upset, pissed off. I wouldn't have been able to sit around the two men and look at them and hear their confessions and hear their so-called apologies and things that they did not mean to do, or things that were not meant to happen. I don't know if I would have been able to sit through that. I would have been highly upset, as you mentioned. So when we talk about forgiveness, and in the Christian belief system, we try to practice forgiveness. How do you take on the mantle of forgiving people for the atrocity that happened to you?
It's simple for me now. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's just that simple. Most of the time, as a Christian, we believe that we don't have the option to not forgive. We don't have the option not to love. So if I want to spend eternity with God, there are requirements for that, and I understand that, and I don't have the options to do it differently. So the desire for my heavenly home inspires me to live my life the best I can.
Right.
And live the Christian rules.
Yes. So, and then to truly find forgiveness is to understand why we practice it, and why we learn and understand what we understand as Christians. Is that a fact?
That's right.
Right.
That's absolutely correct.
So when we talk about prayer, and you mentioned in your book the prayers of Peter Marshall, can you give us one of those prayers that helped you through this dark time?
No, unfortunately, I don't have that book here close to me, and I don't tend to memorize the prayers.
Okay.
But I go and get them when I need them. I think the most appropriate prayer for this occasion would be the prayer that Jesus prayed when he was being taken to Calvary. He said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And I firmly believe that when we don't know who God is, when we don't know who Jesus is, when we don't understand that there is a life beyond this one, and how we choose to live this one sort of sets the course for where we spend the next one. I think that people just don't have that understanding. That lack of understanding could be attributed to many things. Some people don't read, or whatever denomination they are members of, they don't read their Bible. And then you also have shepherds that don't actually preach the Bible as it's written, or preach it at all. It's just sermons by Reverend so-and-so. So But we're independently responsible for our own salvation. We are independently responsible for how we treat people, how we treat other people. And, at the very minimum, we have to know that it's wrong to kill. If we don't understand some of the other things of the Bible, the teachings on love are clear and simple. And the teaching on killing, on what the Ten Commandments, there's so many little simple parts that are clear to everyone, regardless of if they've had a Bible or not. But the Bible says if I don't want it done to me or my family, then I should all the more be reminded not to do those things to you.
Yes.
I don't think there's any excuse. What we learned in later years that many of these people involved in the Klan organizations were members of churches. They were deacons in the churches. And all of that was confusing to me. But it took a long time for me to understand what was at work. Evil is always at work, no matter where you live, in this country or anywhere else. And if you are one who communes with the Lord and reads His Word, you will recognize that evil when you see it.
Yes.
And you can always do anything about it, but it does mean that you can try to stay as far away from it as you can.
Yes, definitely. As we said here, we talked, and we talked about Peter Marshall. I actually came upon one of his prayers. If you want me to go ahead and get into it, I can. It's from the prayers of Peter Marshall in the United Senate. My freedom be seen not as the right to do as we please, but as the opportunity to please to do what is right. May it ever be understood that our liberty is under God and can be found nowhere else. May our faith be something that is not merely stamped upon our coins, but is expressed in our lives. To the extent that America honors thee, wilt thou bless America and keep her true as thou hast kept her free, and make her good as thou hast made her rich. Amen.
Amen. You picked the perfect prayer.
Yes. And we look at it, and like I said, this prayer, is saying, I want to say, not rich as in money. A lot of people look at money as riches as the main goal. Look at riches as you found your peace, you found everything to make your family happy, and you are tackling everything that you have to do to have the just life that you want. And then you find your riches. And as we close out, I want to put it out there to be understood that once again, September 15th is a very tragic day. We're going to always remember this as a tragic event. But we want to put a different, sometimes put a different stamp on things so that the winners who thought they win become the losers. And I believe as, we see the memorials and we see the church as is rebuilt today, and it stands, as erected as it does to show we were not damaged. We were not destroyed. And I believe all of this goes in to say that September 15th is standing as a moment in time to show that when evil thought it did something to try to win, we all came out victorious at the other end of the spectrum. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree that good overcame evil. What they meant for evil became a blessing for all of those involved. in that sense. I absolutely agree with what you said.
Yes. So once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to redo this with me. We done it before. It was a good time. And I thanked you once then, and I thank you again now for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here today and to redo this interview with me. If you want to let people know how can they get in touch with you, how could they get involved with any projects you have or you have in the future, you want to go ahead and let people know how they can get in touch with you, or how could they contact you if they want to?
They can contact me through my email. My email address is my first initial and last name, cmckinstry48@gmail.com. That's cmckinstry48@gmail.com.
All right, guys. Hopefully you got that. And I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to close out the interview as I usually do. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out the Relationship Stuff 101 podcast here on this September 15th, 2021. I've been your host, Shahir Henderson, and I've been joined by Miss CAROLYN McKINSTRY, author of While the World Watched. As she mentioned, you guys can catch her on her email if you want to get in contact with her. We enjoyed having her as a guest here on the show. And Miss McKinstry, I'm going to let you go ahead and sign yourself out.
Thank you, Shahir. It was my pleasure to be with you today. And my message to all within hearing our voices is simply to keep the faith. God is faithful.
All right. Thank you once again, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
You as well.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, guys. I want to thank you guys once again for taking the time to check out the podcast here on this September 15th. I want to thank Miss McKinstry for coming through. What happened on the first podcast, guys, I did the podcast and the video just came out, but not the audio. So we redid the interview here today. Because when we did it, we pre-recorded it, and we had to do the interview today. Guys, at this moment, let's take a moment of silence, guys, to remember Denise McNair, Addie Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robinson. Thank you, guys. Let's not let their memories die, and let's not let their legacies be tarnished by anything other than greatness and anything other than what they stand for, and as we know them for standing for to this day. And they will forever stand for peace and prosperity found through the humble words of those who continue to share their story. Thank you guys for checking out the podcast.
Thank you guys for checking out Informative Classics. Thanks again to Miss McKinstry for coming on to the podcast 2 years ago and doing the interview with me. Today we celebrate the passing of these 4 beautiful young girls. 60 years. Thanks again, guys. Hopefully somewhere I've been informative. Catch you in the next one. Peace out.